everybody, it's me, Miss Lisa. Today we are going to do some wild winter weaving in order to create a wild woodland owl. But before we begin our project, I'd like to share with you some fun and interesting information I learned about weaving. So get ready to watch and listen, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Weaving has been a way of making cloth for thousands of years. Here is an example of linen cloth from ancient Egypt that dates back to the 1st century. People used simple tools like a hand spindle or spinning wheel to turn plant fibers or animal wool into yarn. Most yarn is made from cotton or sheep's wool. Other kinds of yarns are made from synthetic fibers like polyester. After fibers are spun into yarn, the yarn is usually a white or gray color. Yarn can be dyed to take on just about any color imaginable. Yarn can be woven into cloth that can be used to make clothing, like those garments shown here on this Peruvian family. Or yarn can be woven into other textiles to be used as blankets, tablecloths, or simply for decorations. Beautiful hand-woven items like these can be found in markets, like these markets in Guatemala. Weaving has been around for a long time because it can be done with simple tools. These backstrap looms are made from threads and sticks. One end is tied to a post or a tree, the other is secured behind the weaver's back. Backstrap looms can be easily disassembled and taken from place to place. Other looms, like tapestry looms or floor looms, are larger and meant to stay in one place, like a home or a workshop. All looms, including the cardboard looms we'll be working with today, share the same characteristics. The most important feature of any loom are the warp threads, which stretch from the top of the loom to the bottom. Warp threads provide the foundation of every weaving. The warp threads are separated by pegs or dents located at the top or the bottom of every loom. The closer the warp threads are, the tighter and stiffer the fabric will be. The farther apart the threads are, the looser and softer the fabric will be. Before beginning a project, a weaver will add a heading cord to the loom, shown here in gray thread. The heading cord is just a series of knots that keeps the yarn from sliding to the bottom of the loom. The yarn that the weaver works with is called the weft, which is the purple yarn shown here. Weft yarn can be moved between the warp threads with the use of a shuttle, which is here at the bottom of the picture. The shuttle keeps the weft yarn from getting knotted or snagged. Finally, the weft threads can be pushed together using a shed stick, which is this large stick pictured here. Take a moment to notice how our cardboard loom on the right resembles the setup of the loom on the left. Can you identify any parts that are the same? When you're finished, it's time to start weaving. To complete this project, you will need a craft kit from the South Huntington Public Library, and your craft kit contains many things. It contains a piece of cardboard, which has been cut into a loom, 2 bundles of colorful yarn, 2 bundles of beige yarn, which will be used to set up your loom, 2 sticks, 1 plain round stick, little envelope that contains some felt, some feathers, some ribbon, and a plastic yarn needle. And there are some things that you will have to provide from home. Some glue, or a glue gun, a pair of scissors, and this is totally optional, but they can be helpful, 2 pencils. All right, let's begin. Before you begin weaving, you will need to set up your loom. So place your cardboard loom on a flat surface with the ridged pieces of cardboard facing up. You'll have 1 row of notches or dents at the top, and you'll have 1 row of dents at the bottom. Take 1 bundle of beige yarn. This is going to be your warp thread, and make a double knot in one end. The double knot will secure your yarn to your loom. Now count in 3 notches at the top, 1, 2, 3, and place the knot in between these 2 dents and pull it tight. While holding onto it with your fingers on the back of the loom, pull the thread and slip it between 2 notches down at the bottom. While you secure the thread at the top, pull it as tight as you can without pulling the dents towards you, but you'll want to make it tight, kind of like a guitar string, like that. That sounds good. The tighter your warp strings are, the tighter your final weaving will be. Now we'll take the thread, pull it between the next 2 notches here, secure it with your thumb, and pull it back up to the top, and put it between a notch at the top. Let's check it. Make sure it's pulled nice and tight, and let's continue moving across the loom, keeping the threads as tight as you can without pulling the dents too far up. Okay, now you can add as many warp threads as you would like. Keep in mind, the more warp threads you add, the wider your owl will be. The fewer warp threads you have, the skinnier your owl will be. Whoops, I just pulled that a little too hard. Let's try that again. There we go. Needs to be a little tighter. Sounds good. Okay. The important thing, though, is to remember that you should end up with an odd number of warp threads. I have right now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I'll go for 7. Okay, so I'll have kind of a medium-sized owl. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this will be my last warp thread. I'm going to make it nice and tight. And then, to finish it off, pull the warp thread through the next notch on your loom and wrap it around one more time to keep it nice and tight while you're weaving. There you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. You'll remember from our video that the wooden loom we looked at had something along the bottom called a heading cord. We're going to make our own heading cord using some of our yarn. We will not be attaching the heading cord to the sides, but we're going to attach the heading cord just to the weft threads. The heading cord will keep your weaving in place as you weave. It will keep it from sliding, and at the end of your project, the heading cord will keep the whole weaving from falling off of the weft, of the warp threads when you put the weaving on the stick. I know that's not going to make much sense right now, but trust me, we want to set up a heading cord to keep our weaving nice and organized. So you may choose any color you would like from your bundle of thread. Actually, this is your bundle of colorful yarn. You may choose any color you would like. I think I will start with blue. If you would like, you can cut your yarn into smaller pieces. Each piece you have here is about 2 yards long. Keep in mind that when you are weaving with a long piece of yarn, you will end up with a thick stripe. If you weave with a small piece of yarn, you will end up with a skinny stripe. Of course, you can always cut your yarn as you're weaving if you decide that the stripe you've made is the stripe that you'd like to have on your project. I'm going to start with a small piece of blue yarn. Before I put that on the loom, I'm going to take a pencil and slide it underneath the work threads. This is going to raise the thread a little bit higher off of the loom and make it easier for me to get the yarn over and under the warp threads. Okay, so let's take our first color and tie it to a warp thread on the left. Just one knot is fine. Let me bring the camera in a little bit closer so you can see how this is going to look. It could be a little bit tricky, so I want to give you a close-up. All right, we have a knot here on the left. I am going to go over the next warp thread I went over, but now I'm pulling the yarn around the thread. Let's do that one more time. We're going to go over the next one and pull the whole yarn through so that it goes around the warp thread. It can be a little bit difficult to see, but it's kind of like you're making a knot using your weaving yarn and your warp thread. We'll go over and around the next one, like so. Over and around. Pulling, but not pulling too tight. Over and around, pull but not too tight. Over and around, and you can pull but not pull too tight. So let me show you what that looks like. So you have thread that's going over, around, over, around, over, around, over, around, over, around, over, and around, all the way to the end of your warp. Now you are ready to begin weaving. In my presentation, we saw that you could use a wooden shuttle. The shuttle has yarn wrapped around it, and the shuttle is used to easily move the yarn over and under the warp threads. I find a shuttle is a little bit cumbersome to use, but sometimes it's easier to wrap your yarn into a little bundle that can be put under, over, under, and over, under, over, and under. And then you can pull tight and push it gently down to the heading cord. If it's easier for you, you can use a shed stick. Put the shed stick over and under, over and under, over and under the warp threads like so. and the shed stick can be used to push your threads together as you weave. Okay, so now you'll see that I am under this warp thread here. I'm going to go over the warp thread, under the next one, over this one, under the next one, over, under, and over, and then pull gently and use the shed stick to push the stitches together. You want to be sure that you don't pull too hard. If you pull too hard, see what happens to your warp thread? Your warp threads start to squish together, and your weaving will end up going narrower and narrower and narrower towards the top. This is fine if that's the way you would like your owl to look. You may want to start by leaving him loose on the bottom, leaving the threads loose on the bottom, and then pulling a little tighter and a little tighter as you go up to kind of make him a little bit triangular shaped. It's entirely up to you. This owl was kept pretty straight. He's just a plain old rectangle. I tried not to pull too hard on the yarn as I was weaving, and as you can see little bumps here, you can sort of see how the warp threads stayed pretty even, parallel, if you will. Okay, all right, so let's continue with the blue thread. We're going to make a little stripe with the blue, and then we will change colors. So here at the end, I had the thread over the warp thread, and then I moved the yarn around for it to go under, over, under, over, under, over, and under. And now use the shed stick to push everything together. Okay, let's make one more stripe with the blue. We're going to turn around and go over, under, over, under, over, under, and over. Push everything down with the shed stick. Okay. All right, I'm ready to add another color. So what I could do is I could add a color right now by tying it to the end of the blue, or I can trim some of this blue yarn off and get started right away with a new color. Let's do that. I'm going to cut the blue yarn that I don't want and set it aside and choose a new color. How about purple? My bundle has 2 yards of purple. I don't think I want a really big purple stripe, so I'm just going to cut a little piece of purple and set the rest aside. Now to combine the colors, put the 2 tails together, wrap them both around your finger, and then push the tails through the opening, like this. Looks a little bit like a pretzel, and pull so it's nice and tight. This kind of knot will not slip apart as you are weaving. Don't worry about the 2 tails. At the end of your project, we can trim any tails that are hanging out away from your owl. Okay, so here I am at the end. This yarn is over, so I'm going to go under the warp thread, over, under, over, under, over and under, pull gently, push the tails underneath the warp threads if you can, use the shed stick to push everything down, and continue your weaving. Like so. You may need to use your fingers to keep that knot in the back of your project. Oops, it looks like I made a mistake. Let's see, I went over, under, over. Oh wait, no, I got it. Under, over, under, and over. Okay, good. Everything's okay. The nice thing about weaving is if you make a mistake, you just pull the yarn out and start again. Very easy to fix. Okay, there you go. And now we're on to making purple stripes. So that's how you do it. Over, under, over, under. You can tie new colors to the end of the color you were working with and continue. You can make your owl as short or as tall as you would like. It's entirely up to you. You can use as many colors as you would like. The important thing to remember is that this project can take a very long time, and there is no need to sit and weave and finish it all at once. It's a good project to work on when you need some downtime, some quiet time. Maybe when you're finished with your homework and you need to relax. Maybe when you get home from school, you want something fun to do. You can pull out your weaving and work on it. Work on it a little bit at a time. Make your owl as short or as tall as you would like. And I'll see you when the body of your owl is finished, and we'll work on taking him off the loom. Have fun. When your owl is as tall or as short as you would like it to be, stop weaving. Be sure to leave a little bit of yarn, maybe 12 or 14 inches, on your weaving. You'll use this yarn to tie off your weaving. This will keep your weaving from unraveling when you remove it from the loom. When you tie off your weaving, you're going to use the same technique you used when you made the header cord at the beginning of your project. Be sure your yarn is at one end of your weaving. You'll see that this piece of yarn is over the last warp thread. Take the yarn and put it under the warp thread and pull it tight. Now the yarn naturally goes over the next warp thread. So what you're going to do is take this, bring it over the warp thread and around the back of that thread and pull it. You can see how it's kind of tied to the warp thread. Now we'll pull it over to the side, and we're going to put it under the next warp thread, like this. Bring it around, so you're tying up that warp thread, and pull it tight. You can push your yarn down with your fingers very gently. Now we go over the next one, around the back, pull it. You can see how it's knotting there onto the warp thread, and then bring it around and put the yarn under the next one. So we're continuing with our over-under pattern, but the difference is that you're just making a knot around the warp thread. These knots are going to keep your weaving nice and secure as you do the next steps of the project. Going around the warp thread, pull it. Okay, now we're going to go over the next one and wrap the yarn around, and then we will go under the final one, continuing over, under, like so. Now at this end, we're going to wrap this yarn around the final warp thread. So right now it's under the warp thread. Let's wrap it around. And now you see you have a loop right here. Bring the tail end of your yarn through the loop like this. So you're making a knot, like tying a shoe or something like that. We'll do that once, and let's wrap it around one more time and make another knot. Put the tail through the loop just to keep it nice and secure. I like double knots. There we go. Okay, don't worry about the tail end of this thread right now. We'll cut that off later. So to remove this from the loom, we will start at the bottom, If you used a pencil, you can take the pencil out now. You're not going to need it for this step. And you are going to very carefully pull the warp threads out of the dents. And you'll see that there's some little loops left there. And if you have knotted your warp thread around your loom, you can cut that free right there. Okay, now this is where you want to be very careful with your cutting and your tying so that your whole project doesn't slide off of the warp threads. Okay, there's our warp threads. Let's take these two threads, pinch them together, pinch the next two together, and tie them in a knot. Can be a little bit tricky. You might need to have a grown-up help you with this step. There's not a lot of yarn there to work with, so it should look like this. Don't worry about the loose ends right now. And now you're going to pinch these two warp threads together and tie it in a double knot with this one. Remember, we started out with an odd number of warp threads. So that's why you're tying two threads to one thread, because of that odd number. Just like that. Okay, don't worry about these loose threads. And now we'll do the same thing at the other end. This will be a little bit easier because you have more yarn to work with. So we'll pull the warp threads away from the loom. Okay, and we'll do the same thing on this end. Here are two threads and two threads. I'm going to pinch them together, and then I'm going to make a double knot, nice and tight. There's one knot. Don't pull too hard. You don't want it to pucker like it just did. See, if I pull too hard, it's going to pucker. So just pull it enough to get them together and to keep your owl in his nice owl shape. And we'll tie it again, like this. There you go. And we'll do the same on the other side. We'll pinch these two warp threads together, and we'll tie it with this single thread here. We'll tie a double knot. Just like that. And then you can kind of use your fingers to pull your colorful thread down over those light colored threads to kind of hide your knots. And now turn your project over. You'll see all of the knots here from when I was changing colors as I was weaving. If you'd like, you can trim some of these loose threads away. Just be very careful that you don't trim a knot, otherwise your weaving might fall apart. But you could trim these little loose ends if they bother you. They don't bother me too much, so I'm going to leave those, but I'm definitely going to trim the threads that are at the end because I don't want those to show when I finish the owl. I'm going to very carefully cut as close to the knot as I can without cutting the knot itself. And you can just set these little scraps of yarn aside. Okay, I'll do the same at the other end. Okay, there we go. And now your weaving has been successfully removed from the loom. it's time to turn your weaving into an owl who's perching on a branch. So for this, you'll need one of the sticks from your kit. You'll need the little Ziploc bag of supplies. And from this bag of supplies, you'll use the yellow thread and a yarn needle. The yarn needle is made of plastic, and you'll notice that it's not very sharp on one end, and at the other end it has a really big eye, which is perfect for sewing with yarn. So you can put one end of your yellow yarn through the yarn needle, and you can leave a little tail. Let's see here. We're going to be sure that we set aside enough of this yarn to sew 2 feet onto 2 owls. So I think what I'm going to do is cut the yarn in half, and I'm going to set aside 1/2 for the other owl, and this half that I'm working with right now is going to be cut in half again, so I can make 2 feet for this owl. Okay, my yarn needle is all loaded up with the yellow yarn. I think what we might want to do with this is match up both ends of this yellow yarn. We'll make some nice thick feet. So let's match up both ends of the yellow yarn and make a loop to tie the, make a knot rather, to tie the loose ends together. Okay. And I think just one knot should be okay for this, but if you would like, you could do a double knot. Why not? Let's do a double knot. There we go, nice big double knot. Now you get to decide which end of your weaving is going to be the feet and which end is going to be the top of your owl's head. I think I kind of like how the blue looks at the top, so I'm going to attach the stick to this purple end down here. Okay, so to make some feet, which will be used to attach the stick to your owl's body, locate a spot on your weaving where you would like the feet to be. I'm going to put 1 foot on this side and 1 foot over here on this side. Use the yarn needle to poke through your weaving from the back to the front and pull. Now this part can be a little bit tricky because you're going to need to hold the stick up to your owl while you bring the thread over the stick and then back through your owl from the back, like this. Then pull, and you don't need to pull too hard. See how that kind of is looking a little bit like feet? Let's do this at least one more time and we'll see how colorful we want to make the feet. And you're attaching your weaving very loosely to your stick. I think I'll make one more loop. Like this. And then I'm going to flip it over and tie this off. So just like sewing, we're going to put the needle underneath one of our stitches on the back and pull it through. And then pull it through a stitch one more time. If this doesn't seem secure enough to you, you can go back with some glue or a hot glue gun and put a little dab of glue right here at the knot, and that will keep it from unraveling. All right, let's cut this off. And let's work with the other piece of yellow yarn that we've set aside for this owl. Okay. make a knot, and then a double knot. And now we'll do the same thing to make another foot. You can also see a little bit of the warp threads left over from our loom. You can kind of hide those behind the stick if it bothers you. If you don't like the way it looks, you can hide them. And use your yarn thread going from back to front. Pull gently. And again, I think I'll add a little bit more. So it looks like two bright yellow feet. Let's hide those warp threads. Okay, turn this over. And make a knot by putting the thread through one of my stitches and pulling, and then I'm going to do that one more time. Okay, there we go. On second thought, I don't feel very good about these two knots that are here, so I'm going to add some glue to the knots, and it's very easy. Just put a dot on there and kind of smudge it around a little bit. Put a dot and just smudge it around. The glue will soak into the fibers of your yarn, and it will harden, and it will keep the feet from unraveling. But before we continue to the next step, you might want to give this 20 or 30 minutes to dry so it won't stick to your table when you turn it over, and work with the face and the beak and the feathers. Now we're ready to make this look like a cute little owl. And for that, you can go back to the supplies you have in the little plastic bag. So let's take a look at what's in here. You have some yellow felt that can be used to make two beaks. You have 2 pieces of white felt and 2 pieces of black felt, and they're already separated into piles. So set one of those aside for the other owl you can make. And you also have 4 feathers. You can set 2 of those aside for the other owl. Actually, I think I'd like to use the green ones today. And you have a piece of ribbon. The ribbon can be used to hang your owl. And if you would like to make 2 owls, you will need 2 pieces of ribbon. So let's fold this in half, and we'll cut it in half. Set one aside for the other owl. Okay, now you can start anywhere you would like with this. I think I'm going to start with the eyes. So I'm going to use the white for the background, and I'm going to cut 2 big circles. Sometimes it's easy to make 2 circles that look the same if you fold your felt in half and cut them both at the same time, but you don't have to do that. You could cut your felt in half, and you could make 2 different circles, as big or as small as you would like. That looks really big, so I'm going to make that a little bit smaller. You'll see that I'm kind of turning the felt as I cut to make a circle. If you want to make a perfect circle, you might be able to find something in your house that is a perfect circle shape that you could trace. Oh wow, that's way too big. Let's make it a little smaller. If you trace something in your house, you'll probably end up with a perfect circle. I like bumpy circles. Okay, there's one. Now I'm going to make another one that's kind of the same size. I'm turning as I cut to make a circle. You could also draw your circles on there ahead of time too. I think they're a little bit too big. Let's make them smaller. Oh, that looks really cool. But maybe it would be cooler if this one was a little smaller. Okay. There. Oh, that's nice. Okay. I like that. This is the fun part. This is where you can be really creative and silly if you want to be. Okay, before I glue anything down, I'm going to cut all the pieces out and lay them out the way I'd like to see them on my owl, and then I'll pick up my tube of glue. So now it's time to make some small circles to go in the middle of the owl's eyes. And you can make these any size you would like also. And if they're not perfect circles, don't worry about it. I think it looks really nice when they're a little bit bumpy. There's one bumpy circle, and I'm going to make another probably bumpy circle. Okay, oops. There we go. Okay, there's two eyes, and now I'm going to cut a little bit of yellow off of this piece of yellow to make a beak. And I'm going to keep cutting it until I get it to be the size that I like. I think I like that. Okay. And then I'm going to make these two feathers into something that look a little bit like ears on my owl. Okay. So that's what I would like my owl to look like. And now you can take everything apart and use your tube of glue or your hot glue gun to glue everything in place. Okay. There's two feathers. And one eye with a pupil. Oops. And another eye. With a pupil. And now the beak. Like this. Okay. And now you might want to wait 15 or 20 minutes or so before you turn your owl over to add the ribbon for hanging. When your owl's face is dry, you can turn your owl over and add a ribbon for hanging. Just add a couple of dots of glue on the top corners. You can use regular glue, tacky glue, or a glue gun. And push the ribbon down into the glue. And push the ribbon down into the glue on this side. Okay. That is the final touch. So now, more waiting, 15, 20, or 30 minutes for the glue to dry completely before you find a special place to hang your owl. And now, your winter owl is complete and ready to hang. And remember, you have enough supplies in your kit to be able to make a friend for your owl. I hope you have fun. I enjoyed crafting with you, and I hope I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.